Hi, I'm Bridget Price,
And I'm Lauren Kemp.
and this is Entrepreneurs in Progress. Last week, we discussed our individual journeys and how we both became entrepreneurs. This week, we'll be chatting about the reactions we've encountered as growing entrepreneurs over the years, our feelings about those reactions, and how receptive we are now to new reactions. So, Lauren, when you and Brian first started any of your businesses, Rotive, Cozy Cactus, who did you tell first? Was it family, friends?
I told family and friends, my parents, my cousins, some of my aunts. Like the first idea, you tell everyone and you get a very good, strong, positive reaction. I found that the more ideas and businesses and companies that Brian and I had moved on from and done, like the less and less I would want to like tell people, oh yeah, we're doing this thing now. And it's just like, don't worry, you don't remember. You don't have to remember everything in the history of our job hopping, gig starting, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was always kind of a mixed bag. And I'm generally more of an open person. Like I like to tell people what's going on, and if they ask, I'll be honest. But yeah,
sure,
definitely. Yeah, I like to tell. Not so much strangers. Like, yeah, that's kind of weird, but
yeah. I mean, and I guess by strangers, maybe people in passing or people at the coffee shop or.
Oh, yeah. Not really. I mean, I would tell people about Rotive, I guess, since that's the thing. Like, what do you do for work? It's like, well, this is what I do. But aside from that, yeah, not so much. How about you?
Yeah, it's funny. I can't even remember when I first started sharing with my family what we were working on or what we were doing. I can't even recall because there's been so many things. And I know when I first started my college consulting business, my family felt like that was a good fit. They felt like it made sense.
Yeah.
Again, since I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs, they were still figuring out like how I would make money and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. So friends, likewise, I think that over time, especially as I was supporting Marcus with his ventures, it made me less inclined to share what I was working on. He had so many up and coming businesses, and there was one in particular, which was an app that I would say got the furthest along in terms of execution and development, and then it kind of didn't even take off. And that was about 10 years ago. It was an app called BuzzShare, and it was to help promotions company and events and restaurants or bars and clubs promote their events by encouraging their patrons to share that they're at the event. And then again, they would get a free drink or entry or whatever the case may be. So that was huge because that was the first real, I think, business or at least venture that we tried to get out to the masses, like that we really were pulling people in. Even with his print business and some of the other things, we weren't so vocal about. And people reacted. Actually, people were very excited about BuzzShare. They kind of loved the idea. It was very cool at the time. It was innovative. It was, again, pulling on that social media niche that we are all growing so fondly of. And everyone was really excited. And we were excited for that momentum. And then it kind of just fizzled out. And it was just a difficulty of launching an app, getting it to market. There are some tweaks and things like that. And then, unfortunately, we got caught up in the whole 9-to-5 situation, too. So we're finding it harder and harder to pull away to commit time to that. So that was disappointing because that was also the venture that I think we spent the most money in at the time, too. We invested upward of like $10,000 to get this app developed, and it was rough. So after that, after seeing kind of the reaction that we got from everyone that was positive, it was kind of scary to say, okay, now we're working on something else, or that didn't come to fruition.
Yeah.
So, very, very tough.
Well, let's go back to initial positive reactions, because when I think about when people are the most supportive, it usually is that first idea, the new novel thing, and then after a few ideas, a few businesses later, do you find that people are more skeptical, or are they still very positive? Is it the type of person, or is it a mixed bag?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. I think most people at first are supportive because they don't know what it is, much like yourself. And I think anyone can be excited for someone who is trying something new and different and is kind of putting themselves out there.
You would think. Not everyone, but
I mean, at least at first they try to give that buy-in, but over time you start to see where that support that they supposedly had was not really there. Mm-hmm. So I think that I would say about 2/3, 3/4 of people were pretty encouraging. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of people who just were, indifferent. They didn't really respond any type of way. So, but I would say the most positive reaction we received was with BuzzShare and with College Genie. Mm-hmm. And then another creative venture, which was a custom t-shirt company Marcus was starting called Zook's Collective.
I've also found that the people who tend to be a little bit more entrepreneurial are the ones that are the most consistently supportive because maybe they get it more. And the people who are less entrepreneurial in general, like their excitement or enthusiasm kind of disappears the further along you go with something, if after, business after business after business.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, I guess I can ask, do you recall initial positive reactions, like the actual verbiage, what was said?
I don't think I can recall like direct quotes. I just know that you can hear the enthusiasm in their voice, or like, oh, that's so cool, or that's a great idea is, the one, or just it's the way and energy which they bring. Like, if they ask follow-up questions about it, like that's how I can tell it's a positive reaction. Like you hear enthusiasm, you hear like they're happy for you, and they care enough to ask follow-up questions about it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I think you can gauge someone's genuine interest with those follow-up questions, how intrigued they are by the idea, if they want to hear more about it, if they ask how they can help. I think that's really important too, and sometimes we miss that. So yeah, and I think we have to be careful too. I remember before doing College Genie, I talked about it for so long. You fall into that pit where it's hard to say you're starting this new thing when you've talked about it for X amount of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the duration of the idea from when you tell people to when you actually get started, that's definitely a big one. Like, I'm going to wait until like we're rolling and things are going, and then maybe I'll tell you.
You're right.
Because you don't want to tell someone so far in advance that like a year later, they're like,
what happened?
What are you doing? So
yeah, exactly. It was always, for me, cringe-inducing when I shared an idea and then I saw that person a few months later. And they're like, where's that? And I had no update.
Yeah.
Shelved or back burner, or that was like, okay, I have to start following through. And that, again, is sometimes just hard depending on where you are in life, and what's going on, the circumstances. And I think most people are understanding to that. But you quickly become that person. You can quickly become that person who says they're going to do this next big great thing, and there's
never
nothing.
do. Yeah, that's definitely a fear that we don't want to turn into those people. When we say we're going to do something, we want to actually follow through and do it. Entrepreneurs are doers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like with you and Brian, what you guys have always said you were going to do, you've set out to do.
Hasn't always worked, but at least you go out and try.
And you do it, right? And usually, I think, Lauren, like you said, you guys usually expressed or shared that information once you started the ball and once it was rolling. It was never, I'm going to start this and then stop. And then maybe there are some items or things shared between Brian and Marcus, and that's different. But I think that collectively, it seems like you both have been very intentional and careful about how you break the news about a new idea or a new business.
Yeah. And the thing there too is, like, I'm sure you and Marcus are the same way, where you have a lot of ideas, and we know that not all of them we're going to be pursuing. So it's also picking and choosing and deciding which ideas that we are going to follow through on, because we have a list of ideas that we may never get to. So I don't want to I would only tell someone if I want that to someone else to run with it. Like I want someone to manifest Pie Bear and come up with a mini pie like bakery that's super cute. Like someone run with that for me because I'm not gonna do that.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. How was your reaction when you got negative feedback, or have you experienced negative feedback or that loop at all?
So I think negative feedback is interesting. One, because I think we have to acknowledge that it's our interpretation of the person's feedback. So got to kind of have that caveat in there. And for me, I've never had like super negative feedback where someone said, oh, that's a dumb idea, or why are you doing that? Or like, I've never had like really harsh criticism. What I consider kind of negative feedback for me is the indifference. So there's been indifference where like you tell them something good and they like literally change the conversation like immediately. They don't even comment on what you just said. They just move on to something else. Or it's the people who immediately turn and make it about them. So I would say it in like a delivering good news, happy voice, like I'm working with my husband, I'm working remote now. And this is like the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, oh, I could never do that. And I'm just like, okay, Karen, it's not about you. That's like kind of what goes off in my head immediately. It's like, here's the good news I'm sharing. I'm excited about it. And the first thing you do is like, oh, I could never work with my husband. And it's like, okay, like, yeah, like not everyone can or should work with their significant other, but it's again, not about you in this moment. And I'm not talking about the people who like are genuinely happy and they sincerely like, oh, that's great. Like they give you the positive reaction. And then later they're like, yeah, I don't think that's for like me and blah, blah. So that's different. That's them being supportive. And then you're still openly talking about just the choices that, you know, you're making in life. I had someone tell me once, I told them, oh, like I'm working remote. Like I love it. And they went, oh, I could never do that. I could never save lives working remote. And I'm like, yeah. Oh, no. I'm like, there are some professions, obviously, where you need to like be in person. Like,
I cannot believe
doctors and teachers, like some things like you want more in person. But yeah, like that's one that I still laugh about today. Like if someone tells me they're pregnant, I'm not going to go immediately, ooh, that's not for me. You know, like when someone tells you they're pregnant, even if you don't know how they feel about it, you always err on the side of congratulations. That is awesome. I'm so happy for you. And then you feel out like how they feel about it, or like
you'd be surprised at how just off the cuff people are with their thoughts. I learned being an entrepreneur, even being in sales and talking to customers and all of that. Yeah, people have no issue holding back. And I'm surprised at that response of, ooh, that's not a response that I would give anyone who's sharing some really courageous news, to be quite honest, because that's what it is. And I don't think a lot of people recognize that.
No, I don't think people do realize like what a big deal it is, how vulnerable it is. And their immediate thought is like, oh, I could never do that.
Right.
So any news, like I hope I'm this person to my friends and family where if they're sharing good news and I can tell, like I'm super supportive and excited and whatever it is, like you want to give someone a good reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where it becomes dangerous sometimes as an entrepreneur, where you're sharing so much in what you're doing or all of your ideas that people are quick to respond in that way. And I think that having a better understanding of, again, an entrepreneur's lifestyle, their motivations, knowing why they continue to try again would help people in how they respond to that news. And I don't think that conversation ever really takes place with regard to understanding people who are not traditional workers.
Yeah, totally. I think it's something that it's the way you can phrase questions better instead of like, how do you work with your husband from home? It's like, what's it like working from home with your husband? Like, what's it like trying another business idea again or starting over or stuff like that? It's a very different, it's a very small change in words, but it makes it's like a whole different type of approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that goes back to us. We talked about this last week in terms of our first introduction to being an entrepreneur. It took me until I was in my basically close to my 20s, early 20s, to really learn what an entrepreneur is. And I think since we are groomed to set up and work, it's hard for people to really develop that IQ and say, hey, like, I'm going to not respond so adversely to this information from my friend and my news and that type of thing. So, and again, I think it just depends on the person, right? I think it's all subjective, and you're right. I think it's how we internalize some of that critique and feedback.
Have you gotten any like really negative feedback about some of your ideas and pursuits?
Not negative, I would say, like, don't do that or don't pursue that. I've never been told not to pursue an idea or business, which is nice. However, I have heard the, oh, so what is this again? Or what business is that? Yeah. Or I thought you were working on this. And so I have gotten that feedback, which again, depending on where you are in your stage, because you're so vulnerable and insecure, right, about not following through on certain ideas, that can feel like a dagger, and it can kind of create pause for you to try to move forward and figure out exactly like, what do you want to do?
Absolutely.
And so over time, I have kind of developed an armor. It's a work armor where for years I, again, was going to work and working full time as a way to shield myself from that feedback and kind of work in the background and be further along in my venture before sharing it to the world. And I think that looks differently for different people. And so I do think that positive reactions, negative reactions, or mixed reactions do come about at different stages in the process.
Can you give me any examples of different stages and the different reactions you've gotten to them?
Yeah, I think whenever you talk about an idea, people just think of it like that, an idea. But then when you say you're working on something, you're going to share more later, people are intrigued, they're supportive. And then when you actually share that, whether it's a product and a website, social media handles, your first customer, whatever, people start seeing that it's a tangible thing. And then they react differently.
Yeah, definitely a mixed bag the further you get along in the idea business process and stage. I remember like when Brian and I were about to hire our first employee, like super excited about it, telling people, and most of the people, like, we got the indifferent reactions, except from like you and Marcus. I was kind of bummed. I was like, oh man, like this is such a big deal. And I finally told you guys and you're like, wow, that's amazing. And it's like, yes. That's what we're looking for. Like, and I think with that particular stage in the business, it's because people don't realize it's a big deal. I think a lot of indifference comes from not realizing how big these milestones are for entrepreneurs. Like going from 0 to 1, like having a business where you're working on it full time is a huge jump from doing it part-time, and then going from just full-time to actually hiring someone, that's another huge jump. I think a lot of people, because most people just kind of get to the idea and side hustle phase, like they don't realize how big these jumps, they seem small, but they're actually huge milestones.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because I recall you telling us about Cozy Cactus and you seemed a little withdrawn or reluctant to share it, and I thought it was one of the best things ever. I thought it was super cool and love products, and I've always been trying to think of a product, could never come up with one, but I thought it was great how you kind of launched kind of head on. You had your packaging, and I've already seen that evolve. And so I remember you feeling a little hesitant to share that because people's reactions aren't what you would expect them to be, and they don't recognize the work it took to get there.
Yeah, although there's so much work leading up to just like even incorporating like your business. That's a big step. Like that's like, okay, we're investing money, like we're getting legal paperwork to do this thing. Like that's a big step. So just a mixed bag. How has your family reacted to either different stages in the entrepreneur process, or like, have you become more open or less open? How has their reactions impacted you?
Sure. Definitely more open now. And to be transparent, that really didn't happen until you start making money. They start seeing it as a real viable thing. And I had both of my brothers work with us for Made Easy, and they started seeing what it actually was. And they're like, oh, this is legit. And my older brother would make a joke and say, oh, Bridget's a boss, stuff like that, and seeing me in a different way. So now that we're further along in our ventures, both of our families see what it's worth. Marcus's mom and his family have always been supportive, but now they see, oh my gosh, like, this is happening, right?
This is a thing.
This is a thing. They're sharing it, promoting it. And you always have those family members who are willing to get down and dirty with you and figure it out. For me, that's my twin brother. And for Marcus, I think that was always me. And his mom, and he has an entrepreneurial cousin as well. And you have, I think, pockets of family members who can kind of see you grind it out, and they're there to help. And then I think that just trickles down to the rest of the family. So yeah, it's been interesting, but it's been nice to see them coming on board and realizing the potential. How's it with you and your family?
So when I talk about my family, I'm going to talk about my side, because Brian's family, they're very entrepreneurial. They've always been supportive and just had kind of like normal reactions and positive reactions in general. With my family, so I have, cousins who are like my sisters, and they are super supportive all the time, always enthusiastic, always get the reaction that I hope for when I tell good news about, any of these things. The rest of my family, I can sum up with the word is surprise. I feel like that is the main kind of reaction we get from them. So like, surprised that I'm doing this, because I don't think, they've ever seen me in that way or light before, because I'm still relatively new. Surprised that it's something that we're actually working on full time. Surprised that it's an actual business. I think one of my cousins, and this is no shade at all because I love him, we told him about Rotiv, and his reaction was, oh, that sounds like a real company.
Oh, no.
No. It was just like, he was complimenting like the name. That sounds like a legit company name, like in an enthusiastic, like loving way. But
it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, the surprise that we're making money, and that it's always like we made it to the next step of hiring someone. Like they always seem surprised.
Yes. Well, that's good. I mean, I'm glad you have also those segment of people who are just always enthusiastic, supportive, down for you. And even what your cousin said, that was authentic, right? That was very real in what he was expressing. And it wasn't, again, it sounds like he wasn't trying to be shady.
No, not at all. I think with family too, like it always comes from a place of love. Like there's definitely reactions from some of the older family members, my parents, like where it's like concern. The reaction is concern, like they just want what's best for me. I know it comes from a place of love. I know that they're proud of me. They support me. Same with anyone else in my family. I know no one wants me to actively fail within my family or friends. So I try to take those kind of reactions and remind myself, okay, like this group of people do love and support me. Just because it's not the overwhelming, enthusiastic, super positive, super supportive, it doesn't mean it's not coming from a place of love. It doesn't mean it's not that they're not proud, or it's just concern. They want me to succeed is how I view it, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because depending on where we are in the stage, we can get so down and out that we forget that sometimes how people respond to us is them showing that they care about us. Yeah. And that they do have that concern about our well-being, and also want us to be successful, and have that same fear externally that we feel internally about failing. And they don't want to see us fail. They don't want us to experience that. And so I think there's always that reservation to tread lightly with certain news, and making sure that you're grounded, right? That you're realistic and you don't set your sights so high that they're unattainable. So I think it's important to always check that and be cognizant of that too.
Yeah.
Now, I will say friends can be a different type of situation. And I think most of our friends, if they're in our lives, they are there for a reason and they do support us and they love us as well. However, I have experienced that friends or acquaintances also, some of their reactions might be a result of some internal things or projections that they feel about themselves and where they are in their lives. And I think there's more people out there who would be willing to bet on themselves more if the environment was more inviting or seemed more encouraging.
Yeah.
And maybe they've thought about it and they haven't made that leap. And then when they see you take that leap, they feel like it says something about them.
Oh, totally. It challenges their idea, not about just me and how they view me, but it challenges their idea about how they view themselves. It's like, you can do this, then I should be able to do this. Or it can turn very negative on a person, where I do it too, where I'd see like, wow, that business is so further along. Like I must be failing. I'm doing terrible. So I think that definitely with like friends and people's reactions that instantly turn it into them. It's not about you sharing the good news.
Exactly.
It's about them, and it could be they're just not happy. That could be the negative take on it, or it could also be that they're just having a really hard time in that same area. Like if someone's struggling with their career or their finances and they hear you share about how great like your business is doing, it's harder to be happy. Like you can try, but you can tell there's something a little off there. And it's like the same thing around the holidays. If you've lost someone, it's harder to be happy for other people. If you had a miscarriage, I'm sure it's harder to be happy for people who get pregnant. So I definitely try to, my first reaction is like that sassy, like, well, it's not about you, Karen, but I also try to check myself and be like, okay, like, do I think this person is coming from a place of love? Do I think they're struggling maybe with that issue in their own life? And try to be as empathetic as possible, because we all have our initial reactions. Like we can't necessarily control our first gut reaction. And I've gotten into fights with Brian about this because like my face will give me away like what my initial reaction is, but then I like control how I actually respond. And Ryan won't believe me because he saw that initial first reaction and I have to tell him, well, like, yeah, like that was my first reaction, but that's not how I want to respond. And I think that's where people can actually choose to respond in a better way, even if they're dealing with something. It's like, okay, have your reaction and have your feelings and thoughts, but also choose how you want to respond to that person sharing that really great news with you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that when I've had mixed reactions from friends or acquaintances, it was usually something else going on with them. And either they weren't ready to share it, or again, they are looking internally and it's harder for them to be happy for you or supportive in that moment because they're working through some things. Yeah. And I hate to say it, but I think that there are people who secretly want you to fail.
Yeah.
So there could be a status quo maintained, right? So
yeah,
there's just like, oh, well, you're just like the rest of us type of situation. And
you think you're special.
You're right. You thought you were going to make it. And look, this is why they have 9 to 5s. And it's just kind of this, it's harsh a little bit. And I think that you recognize, the further you get in your process, you start to recognize those people. You can call them out. You are aware of their catchphrases, whether it's, what business is that again? Or, oh, okay. Or that type of thing. So I found that the more successful you are, the harder it is for them to be, or at least come off negative. It's harder for them to deny exactly what you're doing at that point. It's easy to deny where you are when you have an idea, where you're barely getting off the ground, and when you barely have had a conversion or sale. So for us, I recognized that the further along we get into our process and our business, the more people are willing to kind of jump in and either become an advocate. They want to recommend us. They want to help us out. And I love that stage of the reaction, right? Like figuring out, oh, you guys are legit. You guys are following through. And I want to support you. And Marcus and I have touched base on this, and I thought maybe we could touch base on it here. Do you think that new entrepreneurs should immediately ask for support from their family and friends? We see it on social media. Hey, go like my page. Hey, come and promote this sale. Tell all your friends about it. And then often within a week or so, we see the other side of that of, wow, all of these people can go and support celebrities and they can go buy their products, but they won't support a local business. How do you feel about the expectation that entrepreneurs place on their families and friends?
That's a great question. I think for me personally, I feel hesitant to ask for support until I feel like I have something legit. And I also am very careful about when and who I would ask for that promotion. And especially if like, what's it about? Like, I'm not telling people on my Instagram to promote Rotive. Like, most people don't care about B2B, like consulting software stuff. It would just be kind of weird. As a cactus, yeah, absolutely. I think most people, like in my demographic, would like that. So I'd be more open to doing that. But I also like to keep in mind, I think you can, as entrepreneurs, you can ask for that kind of support where people are like shouting your names from the rooftop. Maybe once or twice. Like, I would be very choosy about what things I would ask people to just go all out and support, because as entrepreneurs, we have so many different ideas. And if you're on to the next one, by the 10th time, like, you know, you ask somebody to share something, you're like, I'm less inclined. I know like how I would feel. I'm happy to support you and share like your first thing, or you ask me to share something, like, sure. If this is like the third or fourth time, like you're asking me, and I don't know, it just, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I have always been selective with regard to who I ask to support my ideas, my ventures, my businesses, my side hustles, whatever it may be. And that's because I always wanted to put my best foot forward. Even with my friends and family. And I think sometimes entrepreneurs, when they're starting out, they're so eager, and this might sound like an ugly word, but desperate to have that initial success, that they have these grand expectations of their families and friends to support them in droves.
Yeah.
And the moment that expectation is not met, they are very upset, very hurt, and angry now with their friends and family because no one is supporting their business venture.
Yeah, I think it has to be earned a little bit.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of times entrepreneurs starting out feel entitled to that support, right? And that is a very careful line to tread. You don't want to walk into something thinking you're entitled to immediate support. Because let's be real, they say, no, there are no dumb questions. There are dumb ideas. You know, that's just the truth. Now, dumb ideas have taken off, like the freaking pet rock, but that got to a certain place and somehow got legitimized. But it has to be earned, and you can't expect your friends and families, for what it's worth, to be guinea pigs as you try to figure this out. I know in theory it makes sense, like get people close to you, get their initial responses. It doesn't work out that way. And I think family and friends don't like the pressure of supporting something that they're not sure is even going to work. You have to also consider that they feel like their word is bond as well. So
yes,
if they're promoting something that isn't going to work out, that is a bad product or service, they're going to hear from it from whoever they recommended or referred.
Yeah, they're putting their name and reputation on the line. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
definitely want to be cognizant of like how they would feel about it.
Absolutely. And I think for new entrepreneurs, I've shared this with a couple of new people starting out. Don't expect a lot from friends and family. You'll get disappointed every single time.
And don't put that pressure on them either. Like,
yeah, it's not fair. And just if you have a product or have an idea, it's for the masses. It's not for friends and family. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And I think that could also make, again, entrepreneurs feel more vulnerable, isolated, really, right? That kind of echo chamber of I'm all alone, or I'm doing this for myself and by myself. And it's like, just kind of shift your mindset a little bit and manage your expectations a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Now, I love this question that you had written down, because we've been talking about how we feel about other people's reactions, and let's hold ourselves a little accountable. And I would like to ask, can you recall your initial reaction to Marcus's business ideas, whether like his very first one to his most recent one? Can you recall any of your initial reactions?
Yeah, with the initial business with the pallets, I had no idea what the heck that was. And I just kind of rolled with it because it was so new. And again, I was just trying to be so supportive. And in a weird way, I figured he needed me. And it was kind of like a showing him what I got type of thing. Mm-hmm. So I was very excited, very happy to help. Same with his printing business for promotion companies and stuff like that. I was excited for BuzzShare. Mm-hmm. There are so many ventures I was excited for. And more or less, I think I was excited because I liked a lot of his high-tech ideas. Like his app, I was all over that, right? Because we're thinking we're going to be in Silicon Valley. We're thinking we're going to be these technology innovative people or whatever. And so when he came to me with the residential cleaning company business, I was like, okay, I'm done. And he actually started it initially in 2016, actually got it off the ground, sold it, and came back and started Made Easy, because he said, I want to make passive income type of thing. So he started it without telling me, and he got it off the ground, got the website up, and then I was just kind of pulled in hastily because he didn't have all the support. And of course, like we mentioned, we're not going to sit back and let our men fail. That's just not what we're going to do. We're going to grit our teeth and jump in. And that's what I did. And it took me, quite honestly, Lauren, it took me really 1.5 years to really buy into it. Mm-hmm. And this was despite me seeing our numbers go up each month. I was always concerned, will they increase enough to where I can see this money just rolling in? Is it being worth it? I returned back to work, and we both were working full time, and we had really great incomes. So we're comfortable, and I'm just like, is this even worth pursuing? Once I finally bought in 1.5 years later, I'm like, okay, like, I'm all the way in. This is actually legit. And I have learned so much in this business because it is a kind of evergreen business. We've learned so many things where it was a low cost barrier of entry. So it didn't take a lot of investment. It was still about half of what we invested in just an app. And we were able to get a return. And so now I'm pretty much all in. And he's had a couple of ideas in terms of, since this has opened our eyes up to what it means to really succeed in this entrepreneurial world, we see all of the possibilities. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, depending on what he brings to me now, I'm still supportive. I'm no longer just Debbie Downer or a Karen. Yeah. And really, that residential cleaning company was the only time I was a Karen with any of his ventures. So I say 1 out of 100 is I get that. I can take that loss. But yeah, I sometimes am more indifferent now. I feel like because we have more room, if he want to try something, he can try it, and I'm not feeling so like, oh my gosh, this is risky. I feel more secure and stable to where if you want to try something, go ahead. So yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm like, how is it the one idea that I was so resistant to is the one that is actually paying off? So
Yeah. And I think you made a good point about it's again, where are we in that moment in space before maybe, you weren't feeling as stable and secure. And now that things are stable and secure, it's easier to be supportive of other things that they want to try. I remember for Brian, the first kind of like venture that he did when we were together was we were in San Francisco and he wanted to quit his job. He was working at Salesforce at the time, but really struggling. And he just wanted to quit and work on art full time. And I was super supportive. I had a great job at Salesforce at the time, was making good money. Like, I want you to be happy. I want to support you. I don't want to see you miserable. So it was very easy for me at that point to be like, just quit. You can do it. Like, go for it. Now, when it came to Rotiv, I was in a much different place than I was then. I was at a job and I liked Social Tribe. I liked the people I worked with and my bosses and everything. But the actual job role of the social media consultant and working with clients and being client facing wasn't a fit for me. It just made me so stressed out that like my mental health was just so deteriorated and I was in such a miserable place. And Brian had gotten, fired from his job and we were kind of scrambling for a little bit, trying to figure out how to make money. We're seeing our savings account going down. When you think about entrepreneurs, like this is when I think about, oh my God, like we deserve all of the success that we have earned because there are times where I was worried, like I'm going to have to take out my 401k. I'm like, we're going to lose the house. Like things, the way they are trending is not good. So my initial reaction to Rotiv was like, by the time it actually became Rotiv, I was super supportive because it was doing really well. But when it started out, I was super stressed. I was very worried. We had talks about him looking for a full-time job just until we could be more stable to then pursue things. And I know that if I had been in a better place mentally and if we were more stable financially, I'd be like, yeah, like go start that idea. Like, right. It kind of just depends on where you are and where people are in their lives when they hear these kind of things about entrepreneurship. To finish off initial reactions, I would like to discuss the impact that these reactions have had on us and that psychological need for validation and how people's reactions have actually changed how often we share or who we share with. Is there anything that comes to your mind around that?
Yeah, I think that when we initially share ideas with people, especially people we trust, we are seeking that validation, right? That it's a good idea, that we should go for it, that there's a need for it, whatever the case may be. And though it's anecdotal, we lean into it because when you're kind of just taking this leap of faith, you want to feel encouraged to do so. It's hard to jump off a cliff if no one say, go Lauren, go. You can do. If you're up there by yourself, you're like, okay, I'm not doing this. So I think that really does help certain entrepreneurs move forward. I think I am the type that requires validation. Marcus, on the other hand, he doesn't need any of that.
That's great.
I wish I was like that. I'm evolving and growing and learning, but I totally respect that. I love that about him. And he could care less about other people, what they think. He's going to do what he wants to do. He does take note of it, right? So I think part of this psychological impact of these reactions is they're also part of our overall learning experience. So we note, okay, maybe I shouldn't tell them my idea just yet. Maybe I should get it off the ground and then share where I'm at when I'm in a different stage of the process. I think it's all a part of this overall experience where we can promote ourselves and our businesses more effectively, where it will in turn make us feel better about what we are actually pursuing and doing.
Absolutely. I definitely feel that need for validation as well when I'm sharing. And first of all, I definitely am, choosy about whose opinion I do care about. Like, positive reactions from people are great in general. Negative reactions or indifferent reactions, depending on who it is, I either don't really care or sometimes it really does bum me out. I found that I only share with a smaller kind of group of people. If I'm asked, I'll share. But when it comes to like new ideas or things that I'm really excited about, it's a small group of people whose opinions that affect me psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that with you as well? Like, do certain, and I'm not telling you to like name names or anything, but like,
No,
are there anybody's
yeah.
reactions that really bum you out? And are you able to separate whose reactions matter and whose, opinions don't really?
Sure. Yeah, I would say you're right. I have become more selective as to who I share news with and information with. And I would say, quite honestly, the most hurtful is my husband. If he questions an idea or challenges something, that is hurtful. One, because I feel like I always support him. And he's always supportive too. And again, sometimes it's just us being receptive to some of the questions that we get hit with that we weren't expecting to answer. And I would say really him, sometimes my family. I've learned that my family is so unique in that they struggle to understand this entrepreneurial world, and I don't force it on them.
Yeah.
It's with them, it's kind of like a show and prove type of thing, and I'm okay with that. And
I think that's similar.
Yeah, it's like, okay. But yeah, my husband and maybe a couple of close friends, but for the most part, the reactions within that circle is very supportive. And I feel validated a lot with them. But yeah, I mean, I think at the same time, whenever I do get that unexpected constructive critique from my husband, it does cause me to look within and really challenge myself. Once I get over the 30 minutes of being annoyed with whatever he said, I do start to look inward and assess, okay, maybe he's right. Maybe I need to think about this a different way. And that is helpful. And I feel like because I've developed tough skin, even though that still stings a little bit, I'm not so upset or offended that I can't move past it.
And that's something that we actually didn't touch upon was constructive criticism, because nobody's perfect. We're not going to have the best ideas with everything perfectly lined up. And you got to choose like whose criticism or opinion, understanding where they're coming from. And like, it stings at first. Like no one likes hearing any kind of criticism, but at least constructive criticism can be helpful. And so once you get past that initial kind of sting and you're bummed at first, but you realize like, okay, they're trying to help me. They do support me. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that that's part of the process too, right? And even though we don't always admit it to ourselves, I think we are looking for someone to poke holes in something to make it better and to improve. And sometimes we don't have all the answers. And for me, I've become more receptive and open to hearing that so I can grow and be better. It wasn't always like that at first. When you're younger, you think you have it all figured out. And you think that you know what you're doing, and you don't. And now I've realized a lot of people I respect and admire in business or in life, what they've done to get to where they are is study other people. And I am now in this studious role where if I want to get to a certain level, I'm going to study what they've done or what someone else has done in the situation and take some gems and learning lessons from them versus just trying to go out in the world and do it on my own and fall flat on my face. And I think that's really important. And I think I feel as though, again, that also helps with constructive feedback and critique. And hearing that, I think, allows you to be more open-minded and going and seek the answers and learn instead of feeling like you can do it better than the person who's already done it 10 times over.
Yeah, definitely asking people where it's like, that's your area of expertise. Like, I know I don't know, everything about, especially like sales. That's like, if someone is a career salesperson, I'm going to totally listen to what their advice would be and seek knowledge from people who are specialized and do know more than you, especially in certain areas. Because like you said, we don't know everything. We're not the best at every single aspect of what we're doing. And it's important
Yeah.
to kind of be humble in that regard and acknowledge, okay, like this person does know more than me. What can I learn from
Yeah.
them?
This
Like,
is so random, but I was volunteering during the elections in phone banking. And they, depending on the organization that you volunteer with, they give you a script and you read through that script and you call these people and encourage them to go out to vote. And one woman who was a salesperson, she immediately checked me and was like, this is crazy. Someone needs to redo that script. You should always ask someone if this is a good time to talk. You should never just launch into whatever it is. And I was like, oh my God, she's absolutely right. And again, that's just an example of how, regardless of even if it's offensive in how they're saying, if they're abrasive or whatever, I think when you're more open-minded, you aren't bothered by whatever approach they take. If the information is good, you're going to hear it. And that was good information, and I heard it. And again, I think with being an entrepreneur, you have to be open to that critique or feedback, or else you will be stunted in your growth, without a doubt.
yeah. All right. So I would like to end on a positive note. So aside from Marcus, who is your go-to to share good news and new ideas?
Yeah, I would say my go-to is my best friend, and I call her as soon as we hit a milestone or we break through. And lately I've also been calling my mom. She's always just super supportive and she loves hearing any great news that I have to share. And I think what I'm doing too, which I didn't have before, is we're developing a tribe of entrepreneurs, other people who know what it feels like to go through our ups and downs, and we support and encourage one another. And so that's been really nice. And so if it's not one of those two people outside of my husband, Mark's cousin is very entrepreneurial-like, and she's super successful, and we'll share the news with her. And it's just nice providing that update and then getting that positive feedback. And it's a way that we can check in on each other. Like, oh, we've done this, or we're close to hitting this mark. And it's really nice. And that's a goal of mine this year, is to really continue to bring in people who are entrepreneurs, and we can have this channel or dialogue where we can share our successes or small wins and have a toast. Yeah. How about you?
So aside from Brian, my go-tos are my cousins. I know I've mentioned them before earlier. They're Allie and Jackie. I'll give them a shout out. They're like my sisters. They always respond with enthusiasm, with interest, with follow-up questions. They follow up, on further conversations. How's this thing going? And they are just always 100% super supportive, and that's the relationship that we've always had kind of growing up, even before we were entrepreneurs. So definitely them, super grateful. Aside from that, like my parents, they're the ones with like the more concern reactions, but they're super supportive and proud and positive. So
how are they feeling about Rotiv? Because you guys have been killing it.
They're feeling good now. They're very proud and interested, and they like hearing about it now, I think. So it's fun to tell them about good things happening there, or bad things. Like, I definitely try to be honest, like, hey, October and November were shit months. Like, we continue this way, it's not going to be good. And then I like that you brought up the kind of circle of entrepreneurs, because I would absolutely throw you and Marcus in there, because entrepreneurs give us the reaction that we would also like as well, because they get it. So I would definitely say, my cousins, some of our family and parents, and then other entrepreneurs like you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I love coming over and sharing updates and letting you know what sucked, how we're turning it around. And again, even just how we work with our husbands too, what is working, what isn't working, how we kind of fight through all of the ups and downs. So yeah, I think it's super important that we lean on each other. So I think as long as you have your circle of people that support you regardless, and you have a partner or someone going or embarking with you on this entrepreneurial journey, you'll be okay. And always find that if you feel like that's lacking, go search for it, go find it, because it is needed. And for some entrepreneurs, others like Marcus, they can go and march on and live in their bubble. But I think that for the most part, we need other people to lean on. And then I think that's how most entrepreneurs succeed.
Absolutely. Support. It's a great thing. That's it for our episode today. Please stay tuned for next week's and subscribe, like, do all the things. Share.
Do everything.
But yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Bridget.
No problem. Talk to you soon.